Is AI about to take your job? Well, we just talked to someone who thinks so.
70% of all sellers, after they learn the pain, they start pitching their product. This is not what good sellers do. Good sellers learn what the pain is, listen carefully, and then they try to identify, okay, I know that's your pain, but what do you want the output of the thing to be? What do you want the impact to be? Today's AI systems already go straight to impact now. When we saw this happening, that's when I said we could replace 70% of the relatively transactional salespeople that sell $20,000 platforms.
That's Jacco van der Kooij. He's the founder of Winning by Design. And despite some jobs being on the line, he believes companies have a massive opportunity right now.
It's called a zero-day exploit. Those people who knew about the real estate market crashing, they didn't take a big hit. They all walked out of hundreds of millions of profit, right? When Moneyball came out, right, and it was applied by the Oakland A's for the first part, but it was the Red Sox who became a champion on it. Ineos cycling team applied marginal gain. They were the first ones, and it is nowadays optimized by Jumbo Visma, right? But the concept is whoever gets there first gets to exploit it first. So the problem is not, will we get all there? No, the problem is who will get there first, will allow to get an advantage. We do know this in AI. If you get an advantage, the advantage will only get bigger over time, not smaller.
Before we jump into the show, today's episode is brought to you by Everstage, the top-rated sales commissions platform on G2, Gartner Peer Insights, and Trustradius, with more than 2,000 reviews from customers like Diligent, Wiley, Trimble, and more. Visit everstage.com and mention Revenue Formula to unlock a personalized sales compensation strategy session with one of Everstage's RevOps experts. And now, enjoy the show.
So here's the backstory for you, Jacco. I don't know if you know this, but we've obviously decided to continue this show, Tony and I. We bought the rights, we bought the equipment. We had a wonderful teammate called Bart who helped with the entire setup. And you know, some cameras, they can get fairly complicated. This one in particular. So I want to say the last 4 recordings, we were like, okay, now it's in focus. Everything is perfect. Record, get the final product. Yeah, it was not in focus. It just turned out really poorly.
We just needed an iPhone version. Like, these guys way overbought the capability for the video camera there, but it's fine. Now we have it. It's fantastic. We're professionals.
And this is my point. I see the same thing. It's like, look, I had it with my son is, like they all want to go to some other universe, the Android universe, this universe, the camera universe. Once you're in the Apple universe and you just have given in, you just say like, okay, I am with Apple, I'm fine. Then the world you stop worrying about that stuff. Apple figures all this out for you. Like these are not things that we should be having conversations around, like whether my iPhone should be working as a remote and whether I should use an app in order to do that. I control everything in my house via my iPhone, and everything is Mac and it all works, and I'm always protected and secured. So I go like, but yeah, good luck on your technology provider who thinks that it's the Canon D60 212.5 version.
It's a Lumix S5 or something like this. Yeah. And the things with those is like the shorter the description, the more expensive. So kind of, I think we went on the toppest of top shelves with this thing. But we didn't want to talk about video cameras today, Jacco. We wanted to talk about some other stuff. And usually we're talking kind of broader, revenue architecture, bow tie topics, which this also definitely fits into. But we're talking about specific today, artificial intelligence in the go-to-market across the bow tie, right? And you recently and the team did some research on this. You published a piece of content on this also. Maybe to kind of just kick us off on the whole topic. What is your vision around this? What is it that you're seeing? What's going to happen to the go-to-market? Once we get to a point of implementing more and more AI solutions.
Okay, so we got to see AI in context of how we got here, because otherwise we're either going to see it as a threat, we're not going to understand the missed opportunity. So you got to see the whole picture. Yeah. So the whole picture, and I'm only going about a decade back or so, starts in about 2000, like 12-ish, right? At that time, we are growing companies. Now, for the listeners to this, we need to understand that we live in the context of we are working in hyper-growth world company. We're not thinking about AI as if I'm deploying it at Wells Fargo or at ABN AMRO or Deutsche Bank or anything. We're thinking about like, hey, our companies generally have to grow somewhere from like 10 million to a billion, right? In that turn, realize this, the goal of the startup is to turn $1 million asset into $1 billion asset. There is no other industry like that. Gold doesn't have that. Energy doesn't have that. Bonds, stock market, none of that has that. Yeah. We're turning $1 million assets into $1 billion assets. That goes to an exponential part of the growth curve called the S curve, right? Revenue architecture model, the S curve, it goes through that. That is an exponential function for which historically we used human beings to fuel that growth. Now, in Silicon Valley, what do we use for that? 3 specific functions, SDRs, AEs, and CSMs. Yeah. Right? Like that was the call in SaaS. And in that market, it essentially centered itself on that, like if you have 3 go-to-market motion, I simplify it to 3, no touch, low touch, and high touch. No touch historically has become PLG. Low touch was the SDR AE, and high touch is what we refer to as enterprise sales or something like that, right? Mm-hmm. Now that no touch middle category, that is what we pumped the volume up because we couldn't afford the high touch enterprise salespeople that SAP and Microsoft and all those companies were using. So Salesforce early on, by Aaron Ross' mindset, right, created that middle category and said like, hey, that's the new thing. And so suddenly we started adding and hiring companies, small companies started hiring 24 SDRs and 12 AEs or something like that, right? Or the reverse, right? 24 AEs and 12 SDRs, right? Like that, overnight, right? You would work at a company that's barely started, has 36 people in the sales floor, right? Excitement, energy, coffee machines, that whole thing. That thing just blew up, right? That thing, no touch becomes PLG. Low touch becomes AI-led growth. And high touch becomes and stays human-led growth. PLG, AI-led growth, human growth, that's what we're in the middle of right now.
Yeah.
That growth, in order to create that, we funded human beings by the bucket load. We exponentially grew the company size because the resources we needed to grow the revenue exponentially were not there yet to the way the systems are today. Today, we no longer need to grow the people exponentially. Like PLG, we can grow the systems, and systems do grow exponentially. That's the whole thing that we're just seeing in front of you right now.
When I kind of follow your train of thought, right? Kind of you're talking about the processization of selling and go-to-market, and on the no-touch side is PLG. Makes total sense. And the disruption that you're seeing, the change that you're seeing is that in the low-touch space, instead of hiring a bunch of SDRs and AEs to, close 10, 15, 20K deals, you're basically seeing that will be more and more and more taken over by AI-led growth. And, I think this also makes this a little bit clearer for everyone listening because, first of all, there's still place for us in the enterprise, right? There's that kind of thinking is out there. But if we're now thinking about AI-led growth for the low-touch space, how's that going to work? I mean, how do people need to think about this? How do they need to envision this? I know I watched a little bit of a demo that you kind of showed there, but take people through how that future potentially could look like.
Okay, let's start again a little at the beginning. Look, what we have is we are living right now in a world that the buyers don't like the process that they're buying with right now. Like it will be hard, you will be hard-fetched to find any human being in the B2B world that says like, look, I love to buy because the buying process is fantastic, right? Like it's not. It is pretty bad. Gosh forbid you surrender your email to somebody that you don't know in an effort to buy something. You will be overwhelmed with calls, whatever, right? They will find you, they will hunt you down, right? Like so that experience today. Now, that, for example, that experience, how does that manifest itself? It manifests itself in spam, email, bad discovery calls. You have to get multiple calls. On average per call, 5 to 7 questions remain unanswered on the discovery call from the buyer's perspective, right? Very centered, long-term pursuit. And when you're on the call with a vendor, they don't know, most likely they don't know much about you. They don't know much about your company. They probably don't know very much about the market. And it is not uncommon that the buyer knows more about their product than the seller does, right? Like it's very common these days. And that, like you may have heard me explain that this is all because of the knowledge reversal.
Yeah.
Shouldn't be necessarily blamed to the seller. It's just the world has shifted. The buying process is not. And so we're sitting in a process that is awry, right? The seller's process that is awry, with the buyer not liking that. That is that middle sector, right? That AI-led growth. What I encourage you to think of is, folks, an Uber is not a new taxi experience. It's not a taxi that was painted black and, removed all stuff on it, right? No, it's a different experience. Airbnb is a different experience. Netflix is a different experience. All these things in the modern world are different experiences first and foremost. So what we're going to see is a different buying experience that cannot be compared the same way that an Uber and a taxi do the same thing but are hard to compare. The same way that, like you're sleeping in a bed that you rent in an Airbnb and in a hotel, but those are two very different experiences, right? And so so that's the same thing. We're going to go and experience a different buying experience. Some of that is known and some of that still needs to be determined by the buyer. When Uber Eats came, if I go back 15 years, Uber doesn't exist yet, right? Can you predict Uber Eats? Because if you can, I'd love to talk to you and I'd love you to help me what the future buying experience looks like. Because Uber Eats is a room beyond Uber. It's a dimension beyond Uber. You need to have Uber first before you get Uber Eats, right? And so we're trying to think about what will Uber Eats look like in the sales world while we're not completely centered on what the Uber experience looked like. What we do know, Uber wasn't invented by taxi companies. We do know Airbnb didn't come out of the hoteling industry. And personally, I was deeply involved with Netflix. Netflix did not come out of the media and entertainment industry. So if Salesforce says that they know and have the answer to this, I got to tell you, the history has shown that the established providers in this market have no clue and are the worst part to look at because they're the ones who are generally railing that down. Anyway, so I don't see that Salesforce per se or any of the established vendors has an answer to where we're going in the future.
From looking at this space, there's starting to emerge a couple of glimpses, though, how this thing could look like, right? I think you have, most prominently recently, 11x, actually kind of out of the UK, now moved to the US, did a big Andreessen Horowitz round to, selling practically the AI version of an SDR. Makes total sense, sends those emails, sends a LinkedIn message, comes up with that stuff, takes inbound calls. Now, people might love it or hate it. That's actually great for 11x. People have opinions about them, but, whatever they may be. I think we have seen a bunch of automations happening in the marketing space, right? So kind of the whole copy AI or writer, kind of those teams have built a lot of stuff around where you could see I can see how this is going to impact marketers' life. And lastly, I think we have seen similar developments in the support space. Well, I don't want to say CS, but in the support space, right? Kind of an agent answering those questions in a really fast way. I think where people still fundamentally kind of disconnect and where it at least kind of switched for me, reading some of the research that you guys did. Okay, here's actually a play for an account executive. Here's an account executive example that can be done through AI. Now, kind of some of the stuff that you've shown there is still, you can clearly see it's early days, but it's addressing exactly this knowledge gap, right? That, I think buyers have, researching a lot, understanding what's going on, and then meeting either a junior rep or an ill-prepared rep that is unable to answer those questions and, has difficulties going, oh, let's go technical, let's go legal, let's go into some of the areas that are really important maybe for the buyer, but the AE really can't be expected to have any clue about any of that stuff. And suddenly with AI, snip your fingers, done, it's there, right? I mean, was this a little bit of a turning point for you as well, kind of, seeing that and kind of seeing the application of that in the go-to-market?
I am so excited to share all my passion with you folks. I think about it day in and night, and some people go, oh, that must be a blessing. No, freaking, it's a curse, right? Like this stuff. Okay. So the problem is as follows. We are currently applying AI on the same processes. Those processes were broken in the first place.
Yeah.
And so if we're moving it now, like the reason why companies that involve themselves like in 11x are working is because they're optimizing a highly inefficient approach and they make that more efficient. And so think about AI has it does three things, and we're primarily working only on two. Number one, it does something in more volume. It just can process things at a higher volume, right? Like bingo, love that, right? Number two, it does it at a lower cost, at a fraction of the cost actually, right? Like by my calculations, within a year, 2 year, at 1/50th of the cost, right? And number three, it can do things at higher quality. Now, out of those three things, people are only interested in two of them. Which would those two be?
Well, volume and cost, right?
Volume and cost.
Who cares about quality? Who cares about it?
Hey, it can't beat our quality, right? So we know that. We are the high quality.
The quality of our guests.
Yeah.
And so what you're going to see, actually, the third is what buyers are asking for. That third one is what the buyer wants. The buyer wants more quality. The seller wants lower cost and higher volume. And so what most of these AI companies, including those you mentioned on, are simply based on, hey, we can either process the same amount of leads and get an improved outcome, our conversion is better, or if you have an increase in volume, we may do it at a lower quality. That is the case. Many AI systems operate at a lower quality, but because they can process so much volume in such a short time frame, the output is improved, right? That is in the eyes of the observer. Did we actually make an improvement? Well, the outcome is better. And to some companies, that is perfectly fine. They go like, dude, I got 1 million visitors on a website a day, whatever, right? Like convert all that as much as you can and you'll be fine. Most B2B would do this if they have 100 qualified leads every day, right? Like 100 qualified leads a day, everybody in the B2B would go like, damn, I have that. In all intents and purposes, that is a quality-based business, not a volume-based business, not a low-cost-based business, where AI today is very focused on lower cost, higher volume. Mm-hmm. That will change, and that is changing. And so you see companies like onemind.com, right? Like number one, and then mind.com. They're more focused on, can we create a quality-based experience rather than a quantity-based experience, knowing that the price of this is already so low that you don't really have to think of cost. The cost is already coming down, right? Like across the board. So at such a volume, think about it that way, right? Now, in that process that we're applying in what we're working on, we're still executing the process as is. Is it the discovery call? Is it the follow-through? And we are not understanding yet what it is. And I'll give you a few examples of that. If you're open to it, I can give you a few examples of what does a new experience look like.
Please.
Okay. A new experience looks like when the three of us are on the call, and I simply want to know something about, let's say, winning by design, right? Like, I would say is, can somebody dial in the Winning by Design? And we would ping, and let's say we're on a Zoom session or something like that, and we see Winning by Design's agent that will soon launch will be called Winnie, and Winnie will join the call. And we go like, Winnie, we need to know the following. What is the price of this? Winnie gives us the price. It's price per whatever, revenue architecture seat is $2,500. Winnie, when is the next class? Winnie, can you sign me up for that? Yes. Winnie, I need my team to do it. What does 10 will cost like? Winnie says, blah, blah, blah. Can you send me a quote right now? Winnie then asked, Jacco, do you approve that or do Sherry approve that, right? Or do you have a colleague who approves it? I said, my colleague Sherry would approve that. Winnie would say, I know that your email is, jacco@syntax.com. Does Sherry's email follow the same syntax? Yes. Okay. Do you mind me sending her an invite for next week? Yes. All that will be done with Winnie in 5 minutes. Okay.
Yeah.
I have been testing now with these agents, like humanoid agents that we speak to. I don't need to be on the phone longer than 10, 15 minutes is stretching it when you're on the phone with an AI. Because you get all the info you need, because you ask straight questions, you get straight answers. I encourage you to go to onemind.com, engage their agent in, I think it's a Chrome browser, not in a Safari browser, but do it in a Chrome browser, and practice talking to an AI the same way that when we looked at ChatGPT's cursor blinking for the first time, we didn't know what to ask, and we entered Google queries, right? Like, And a year later, we know how to work with it. And now, reflect, ChatGPT, reflect on the article you just wrote and compare what it was, right? What do you think? It's a fantastic query, right? But we learn We learn these things and how to communicate with AI. And we haven't learned how to do that with agents yet. And so we're replacing humans with agents and expecting that we're going to have a 60-minute call with an agent. No, it's going to be 10 minutes and you're going to get every info. You're going to have all the view graphs. You're going to have the details. It's all going to be emailed to you, summarized and everything in 10 minutes.
This still seems to me like a Q&A thing.
Yeah.
Right? But it goes much further than that, right? I mean, these agents, at least kind of what we have seen, sure, they can answer specialized questions. Like, hey, do you have a SOC 2 Type 2 certification? Well, yes, blah, blah, here's the documentation, blah.
Talking
right?
leaflet.
Yes. Yeah. But also, this agent would actually then, turn the table a little bit and be like, but let me ask you some questions.
Right? Now,
right?
Here's where the things are happening right now. So we are right now enabling some of these agents with the winning by design SPICE methodology, right? And that is asking questions correctly. And what we notice here, most of the agents get to what we refer to as a situation and pain question. Let me ask you what your situation is. Oh, you have this amount of people and so on. Do I get it right that you have this pain? Yes. And then they can pitch. What we saw with the agents that surprised us from the get-go is that once we powered them with the SPICE algorithm, that they do not pitch after they learn about your pain. And that they ask, and if you say, it's like, oh, how does your problem solve that? They say, oh, may I ask, you said this thing, and that's the impact that you wanted out. May I get it right? Is that the output that you want out of this? The AI systems started to advance the conversation further than 70% of our sellers do. And we know that because we categorize that, right? We go, okay, they're in the situational domain right now. They're learning about the situation. Then the seller moves, identifies pain. We know what the questions are, right? 70% of all sellers, after they learn the pain, they start pitching their product. This is not what good sellers do. Good sellers learn what the pain is, listen carefully, and then they try to identify, okay, I know that's your pain, but what do you want the output of the thing to be? What do you want the impact to be? Then they go around that. Today's AI systems already go straight to impact now. When we saw this happening, that's when I said, it's like, we can now replace 70, based on that, we could replace 70% of the relatively transactional salespeople. They'll sell $20,000 platforms. Of course, if you sell $250,000 software or above, you have different skill sets, multiple negotiations and decision process navigation and stuff like that. But that alone was already exceeding. This was the start where we were like 2 months ago. If you see where we are today, it's...
And I think kind of this was a typical like discovery call situation. I think what's actually in my head is like, well, theoretically cool, it can obviously kind of go further, but from your perspective, and maybe you already have examples or proof for this, but the rest of the selling process, it's less so. I mean, I've seen some of the the SPICE
selling. Wow,
we're gonna do this in post. I've seen some of the SPICE frameworks also for the discovery call. It's not scripted or something, but it's extremely well structured. I can totally see that an AI reading this applies this perfect, and humans will struggle with that. Period. As they struggle with every new thing that anyone learns. But do you think that from this clear and structured methodology for the discovery call, that the AI can also transport this over into the rest of the sales conversation? Do you think we're there already, or what's the situation on that?
Yes. So imagine the following. And I saw that in the demo the other day. Our friends at OneMind were accidentally demoing this because they saw, like AI developers sometimes don't know how good their product is, right? They go, but what they did was the following. 2 things. Like there was a second discovery call with a customer. The AI remembered everything automatically from the first discovery call. In the first discovery call, the AI, in this case, her name is Mindy. Mindy extracted, through the conversation, the seller said, I need to bring my CMO in this. Okay. In the second conversation, Mindy knew, hey, last time you said you were going to bring your CMO, may I ask, is your CEO with you? Okay. Folks, that's decision process navigation.
Yeah.
That is the navigating of decision process, right? And then, whatever follows next. Now imagine how close we are to if I say, let me bring my CMO in this, right? Or in this case, my COO, which is Sherry. And Mindy says, okay, I looked up on your LinkedIn profile or your website. It looks like Sherry is your COO. Did I get that right? because there's no limitation on access to information on LinkedIn, right? Like that is merely an API call to be made, right? Look at that. How many of the sellers don't know the CRM record of the customer really? Like there is data in the CRM, they're just not using it. They're just not looking at it and preparing with it. AI will do this all automatically. Don't get me wrong. Like I've sold multi-million-dollar, largest deal I personally closed myself is $50 million plus, right? You don't do that by looking at somebody's LinkedIn profile. That's not what that's not what I'm tackling here. What I'm tackling here is you have 5 discovery calls to close a $20,000 deal, right? Can you optimize that? Oh, heck yeah, right? Like you can optimize the heck out of that, right? That's that middle sector, that like AI-led growth sector that we're tackling, right? Where will it apply? High volume, in our world, high volume, 20 deals a month, 50 deals a month, 100 deals a month. You're right, like not like human-led growth that takes 6 months on average. No, deals that need to close.
I think one other, so when you think about the benefits of AI, so one is like, oh, wow, the sales rep is prepared. Like that's new.
And the sales rep is actually answering my questions.
Yes.
Okay, think of the following. I want you to step with me in the agentic world. Now realize where most people get lost in the agentic world is when they think that all the agents that I'm going to speak about in a second, that those are real things they interact with. There's not. You interact with one agent and that agent has sub-agents for a second. And those sub-agents they're not visible to the seller and they're not visible to the buyer. They're only visible to us, infrastructure providers at the back end, okay? Follow my thinking. So I'm going to divvy up 3 roles for ease of understanding. I'm going to have an agent to develop and generate the lead. I'm going to have an agent to close that lead. And I'm going to have an agent to make that lead happy with whatever they bought, right? Simplified, right? I'm going to go to the agent that sells, the sales agent. Underneath that agent, there will be an agent, a sub-agent, that specializes in discovery calls. In that agent that specializes in discovery calls, there will be an agent who is specializing in diagnosing and using question-based sales techniques, which are well-defined, spin selling, QBST, all that stuff, right? Now, in that agent that specializes on just asking diagnostic questions will be an agent that learns, okay, hey, today I did it 1,000 times this way. I figured out like how to do that. And that agent will be running, yes? Now, there's 1,000 calls a day like that. So there's 1,000 calls that happen every day that execute a QBST, a question-based sales technique. It executes a particular sequence. And it learns that there's an improvement ready. There will be an agent checking on all question-based sales techniques that comes to the conclusion, if we tweak this a little bit and we change that question and we use this word, we may have an improvement. So the next day, the QBST-based sales agent, which is part of the discovery, which is part of the sales process, right, which all happens in microseconds, will get improved. And the next day it figures out that it has 12% improved outcome by changing the sequence.
Yeah.
And so moving forward, it creates that delta and it tries to improve itself. And sometimes it moves backward, right? Now think about that happening not over a period of weeks or months, but think of that being executed at 0.2 seconds. All that, and it happens instantly. It analyzes, it improves, it figures out, and it instantly starts to iterate itself. The point that you see down here, what is happening, is that agents have an ability to improve itself in a very short time frame, and they will never walk out with that knowledge. Whereas salespeople has a longer closed loop cycle to train and to improve, and when they get at their crescendo, they ask for a salary increase, more stock options, and if not, they walk out of the door, which is extremely disruptive for a company going through the S-curve. Because either they have to pay, which means their sustainability goes down, or they let the seller go, which means the scalability is lost. Therefore, AI agents is in a perfect application and will be applied to all those companies going through that hypergrowth mode. The problem is, for a lot of companies, it's too late. And I can tell you for how many, it's for about 1,000 of the 1,200 unicorns, it's going to be too late.
Just wondering here, like with everyone being able to implement these systems, we're all going to have the same agents that are great at discovery calls. The whole competitive advantage around we have a stellar sales team, will that just evaporate during 2025?
Absolutely. Okay, realize the following. Moneyball told us this, right? The movie Moneyball. Maybe not the movie you had in mind today, but like it is there. By the way, I can use The Big Short. I can use anything. Anybody who's a first mover has a disruptive advantage, right? Anyone. It's called a zero-day exploit. Those people who knew about the real estate market crashing, they didn't take a big hit. They all walked out of hundreds of millions of profit, right? When Moneyball came out, right, and it was applied by the Oakland A's for the first part, but it was the Red Sox who became a champion on it. Ineos cycling team applied marginal gain. They were the first ones, and it is nowadays optimized by, the Visma, Jumbo Visma, right? But the concept is whoever gets there first gets to exploit it first. So the problem is not, will we get all there? No, the problem is who will get there first, will allow to get an advantage. We do know this in AI. If you get an advantage, the advantage will only get bigger over time, not smaller. So if you are getting in AI first and you deploy first and you're testing first, then you get the advances first and so on and so forth. That's the trick that companies don't get. And so what you and I and what we're dealing with, and I'm doing these days a lot of dinners with executives, is like I'm going like, look, I don't care what tool you get. I don't care where you deploy it. My advice to every listener down here is tell everybody on your executive team that in their area of function that they're responsible for, they need to do in the next 30 days a test with what AI can do, and they need to experience it. Because I hate to say it, but in our world, I would say 7 out of 10 lazy is not doing anything, right? They're just sitting on their hands because the pain of doing nothing is very minuscule versus the pain of doing something and disrupting is very, and I'm going like, folks, they ask me, why is the market not taking the change? And I'm saying it's simply, and I hate to say it in the raw way, but there's not enough bodies of dead executives laying on the side of the road right now, right? That's what's happening, right? Like that won't be the same a year from now. Because 2025, gentlemen, will no longer be as like, oh my God, the financial market hurt us in 2021 and now we suck and we don't have money. That won't be the case any longer in 2025, right? From everything we're seeing, and folks know we have good exposure to VC and PE firms. It is like, folks, put up or shut up growth, right? Like if you can grow, you're not going to get money. We're going to take ownership of your company. We're going to have you do a down round. We're going to replace your CEO. But these things must come to bear right now. And AI is a solution. So it's kind of like pressure on, which I kind of love. Guys, are you not? Are you with me? This is exciting, right?
Yeah, I mean, like of course, that's exciting for people on the sidelines. As a services business, as a support, as a consultant, right? It's kind of, you're not under the same gun that the CEO is under the same gun and so forth, right? So it's like they have a need, they have a pain, they need to kind of, I don't want to say they're in a squeeze, but there's some expectation that they need to deliver. And they're going to be looking around like, geez, who can help me? And you know what? Jacco can help you. So that's why I'm saying, right? I think it's going to be interesting. I think it's going to be fun. I think finally seeing growth again and stopping the big whine, I think I'm really looking forward to that. But obviously, it depends a little bit on the perspective.
Okay, let me tell you why your perspective is right, but it's much bigger than that. What AI is doing, because it operates at a fraction of the cost, it democratizes GTM. Mm-hmm. You no longer need a $50 million round from a top-tier Silicon Valley VC or Notion in the UK or somebody like that, right? And Notion will do fine. They're the top AI VC firm in Europe. But, we no longer need these gazillion dollars of rounds in order to grow, which made rapid growth primarily valuable for US companies. Every company in the world, within short, can deploy AI-based GTM motions. Now, granted, if you're selling a $500,000 software, very specific software for the war industry or something like that, yeah, you're going to have special sellers. But for 90% of all the products, which aim somewhere to be sold between $1,000 and $50,000, right? They don't need to hire a floor full of people in the Salesforce towers, right? Like you don't need that.
So actually, on this topic,
GTM.
I think so. Obviously, kind of it democratizes GTM and kind of allows all of this, hyper growth and all of these wonderful things.
In a different form.
Yes. My point is actually kind of when you kind of flip this, over to the other side, because a lot of people listening, we were like, oh, geez, am I the 70% or am I the 30%, right? What is it? What do you think is going to happen? I don't want to say the job market and stuff, but what do you think what's going to happen there?
Okay. This is a common misconception, and I'm going to be really harsh on this. Okay. And we all need to be honest about what the market is that we're living in. Okay. I'm going to draw an analogy. I'm going to draw what we live in, the world that we live in. Okay. Analogy number one. I need to dig a hole, but an excavator doesn't exist yet. How am I going to dig a hole? I'm going to get a whole bunch of human beings with a shovel digging a hole. Okay. The excavator comes around. Do you think that the human beings who are all breaking their backs on digging the hole go like, excuse me, I'm going to strike because I don't want that excavator. I want to continue to dig a hole myself. No. The excavator was invented for digging the hole, and the human beings were used as surplus, as a way to fix the point in time that hole needed to be dug, but we needed the excavator, right? Now, those human beings who dug the hole were relatively unskilled labor. They need to be healthy, they need to be sound thinking, don't get me wrong, but they were unskilled labor, right? Now let me draw that analogy to that has happened in our world. Back in 2012, if we go back to the 2005 timeframe, right? And I grew up in the 1990s as a sales professionals. Sales professionals generally required about 10 to 20 years of expertise. You were not a seller in your mid-20s. You were not even a seller early 30s. You were in your 40s, you became a seller because you needed to learn the trade, the product, the market, and so on. And you built extensive networks on, right? Now, starting the 2010 timeframe, we needed more sellers because of this new approach to selling, this inside sales technology, the way of selling. And we couldn't hire, we had two problems. We needed them in volume, and we couldn't afford to pay them like $250,000, $350,000, which is what, in those days, I would make $250,000, $350,000, and would pay that to my sales teams in those days, right? And that was not even questions asked. That was, thank you for showing up. And there's terms for that. It's called gray foxes, bolt tops, and stuff like that. That means that people of age, right? People who have kids in private schools and has car payments and house payments to make, they were in sales and they were motivated. Hence, the whole quota plan came out and all that. But now we're entering this we need growth. We can't pay for it. So we're hiring young people early on in their career who came out of 12 years of education on sales, who studied sales for extensively, who had internships in sales. Okay, wait, what? Okay, no, that didn't happen. There was no 12 years in sales. There was no internships. What happened is a whole bunch of people entered sales because they didn't like what they studied and they needed to find a home for themselves. And they go, like, you know what, no qualifications needed. I'm going to apply for that job. They need a lot of people. I can make a lot of money. The coffee machine looks fantastic, right? Ping pong during lunch. And so they came by the hordes. They came into our market. And, like they were welcomed. We needed the capacity the same way that we needed the capacity to dig a hole, right? Well, the excavator just came around, people. We have 70% of people that do not care, that do not listen to this. If you're listening to this podcast, I guarantee you, not guarantee you, but I pretty much can tell you, you are 30 minutes into this. If you're still listening to this, you're passionate about this topic, you're going to be fine. You're part of the 30%. The 70% right now is not listening to this podcast, is on their mountain bike, and they will show up tomorrow at 9:05 and leave at 4:45, right? Like, you're not passionate about your job. Yeah. 30% is the passionate people who know what they're doing, who the market will always be ready to play for, right? We just don't need any longer the people who are not interested. And believe me, you both ran sales teams. If I tell you to go back to the company, you will at least be able to pick out 5 people on your team of 10 that you go like, yeah, that's fine. We don't need them any longer.
No, I mean, always. Yeah, of course. I think my problem is like, well, will there overnight just be more holes to dig? Right? I think the amount of demand is probably going to be kind of the same, right? And I think that will lead to a net reduction in workforce that you need, which is also kind of the idea, right? Kind of to a degree, you're also kind of saying that is actually, we're coming out of this phase of growth at all cost, we're kind of still doing the same thing, but on a smaller budget, right? This is actually now a way out. This is actually now like, actually we can kind of fix it with this thing now. So it's a good thing, right? But it still means, hey, we actually don't need so many folks, and that's great for some and it's not so great for others.
I want you to think that this is a step, what we're going with AI is a step in between. A new step will occur. It is already happening, we're already seeing it, and your eyes are already opened on this. So first step that we had is that the financial markets collapsed, and that I call that first storm. Storm number one, right? It started late 2021, and in our world, DocuSign was the first stock that dropped, and it's early December 2021 that happened, and it cascaded through. It was not a domino, it was the market as a whole who fell. They were just the first one to fall, right? And so that happened, right? And we're in the remnants of that right now. In 2025, we got through that. Markets have reestablished, and we're establishing growth. We're now being hit with the second. The second one is the AI market replacing the first market. And as a result, we're trying to still execute today growth at all costs, but we do it growth at lower cost.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's what we're using AI for. And that ain't going to work. It's going to work for a while, but that, following your term, what you're saying is we're digging more holes to it. That will run itself into the ground. That's not where the success companies are coming from. The success companies are coming from not doing volume and lower cost. They're going to create a better quality experience, right? That new process will actually involve the remaining 30% of your sales team needs to do something different, right? And teams that understand that 70% is going to go to AI and that 30% is going to human. Now, you shouldn't think of it as 70% of my people get replaced and 30% of my people stay. You should think of it as 70% of the activities of what needs to be done gets replaced. That will come out at the same result, but that means that the sales process will be optimized for humans to interact with each other with humans and for AI systems to interact with humans where it will be two specialism. So for example, in-person meetings, small events, small conferences with 50 executives or 50 leaders or 50 experts meeting will be an ideal scenario where a vendor will set up that environment, make room for that environment, invite people, let them interact with each other while they pay for the bills and facilitate the conversation, get a good speaker and so on. That will be fantastic, and not for a one-day event. Good sellers, a good sales professional will go to a city like Berlin, book a meeting, then not only book a meeting with that customer that they met, but will start meeting with 3 other people inside the same company in multi-threading. Then they will throw a pavilion event that evening where they invite people in the region. The next day they will have a workshop. That afternoon they will, having dinner. Like, it will be a whole thing of events. Today, folks, the mid-market doesn't work like that, right? The mid-market works like start your Zoom, close a deal, move on to the next Zoom. So that human element will come back. That's the 30%. And once a month, a week will be dedicated to pure human-led growth interaction. Go ahead.
What we've seen with PLG and then... Sorry, go ahead.
So when I deliver something that passionately, you got to at least affirm what I say. You got to go like, damn, you can disagree with it, or you go like, but...
Jacco, I absolutely agree with you. And I want to take it one step further. While I think there's going to be the balancing, I think also there's going to be a merging of things. That was actually kind of where I was going, right? So what we've seen with PLG, which is a complete, it's a process that's basically being run. And then over time, it was like, hey, wait a minute. We can do some, I don't know, I think they call it sales-led growth and kind of have a combination of human and PLG at the same time, right? Now you and we are kind of talking about AI-led growth, where it's then, this avatar and everything is being done and kind of no human interaction. Well, there will probably be, a motion where maybe those two things are blending a little bit. It could be that, you have a human on the call and then you have your assistant on the call as well that does some stuff, right? We're seeing some of that already now with those enablement tools that do like live coaching on the call and so forth. And, our imagination is still a little bit too short-sighted, I feel, kind of to see, okay, here's a new approach. And what are all the mixing and matching? Where's all of that going to end up being, right? And I think there's so many additional versions and combinations that we're not currently thinking of actually when we're thinking about AI-led growth.
Fantastic. You have a fantastic point. I appreciate that perspective. Let me add the third storm entering the room, which addresses that. So the first storm was like the financial market crashed, like we need to become sustainable, and oh my gosh, we're spending $4 to acquire $1. That's probably not the good way, right? GTM efficiency, the whole talk about GTM efficiency, we come through that, we lower the cost, we fire people. Now AI comes in, right, and goes like, okay, for the younger companies, I need to grow. I'm not even going to hire people. I'm going to straight go to AI, become highly competitive. 1,200 unicorns today have like hundreds of people. I saw the other day, several companies and beloved people that, we know like at outreach and so like multiple rounds of layoffs, right? And they will find their ground back. But we'll see unicorns like that are going to go through a challenging time, right? And they need to just like, they grew too fast. AI will disrupt that, right? But then the third one comes. And the third one is going to be really hard for most people to digest and understand. The problem with the third one that the market is realizing, and you already start to see the first words coming around, is like, how can it be that I have 10 times more software tools than I had 5 years ago, but productivity of human beings has stayed relatively flat? Mm-hmm. This understanding that we're throwing too many tools into the tool shed, but nobody's using those tools, and as a result, productivity is not going up, is leading to an entire new understanding. Is SaaS actually the right solution? Now, in my opinion, SaaS as a software product has always been overvalued. At 20x is definitely overvalued. At 10x it's overvalued. At 5 to 7x we could argue whether it's valued, but there's overvaluation for the product and undervaluations for the services. So to give an example, Winning by Design will sit in a major Fortune 500 company. We will spend there 2-3 days. The tool vendor will come in for 1 day, right? Like for 1 hour. That company that comes in for 1 hour is valued at like 10, 20x. The service provider who helps the people realize, builds all the human understanding is valued at 1 to 3x. I think that is going to balance itself. This is leading to the term software as a service or service as a software. What we see companies like Salesforce starting to do, they start to offer services and they start to compete with services companies right now. And as a result, we're going to see massive firms starting to bump each other heads. All this leads to the following. What is software? Because I can tell you about like a decade ago, I forgot who said it, you may put this in the notes or something like that, but there's a famous guy who said every sheet in an Excel spreadsheet is an application.
Yeah.
Right? Nowadays, like yesterday, we need to add some number. I took a picture with ChatGPT, right, and said, add the numbers up to me. Folks, all those companies that thought that every sheet was a different application, that's now a query inside ChatGPT, right? So those companies are no longer really companies. So what are we buying? This is where we're going to see that much of the market is moving in Winning by Design terminology on the revenue meter. We first were pay up front in hardware, then we will go pay up front hardware with software support contracts. Then we went to annual support contracts, SaaS. Then, and now we're entering what I refer to as the PPX. We're going from SaaS to PPX. SaaS is subscription. PPX is pay per outcome, which X stands for action, outcome, click, whatever you want to do, but it's something. Mm-hmm. Now, when we move to the PPX world, where companies are paying for outcomes, folks, we're not having annual subscriptions any longer. Now, the reason why annual subscriptions are so valuable for providers is they essentially make a lot more money on those people who are barely using the product than they're really... Your top 5%...
It's like a gym membership.
Yeah. Right? Gym membership thing. Thank you, right? Yeah. And so that is going to be ripped out of the market. Now, do that to... Look at 1,200 unicorns. Do that to 1,200 unicorns and figure out who's left standing. Now, and the last point, and I know I'm talking a lot, but I'm so, like, I'm sitting here and I'm seeing it right in front of me, right? Folks, of those 1,200 companies, I argue that 600 of them are nothing more than mom and pop software shops. And they have a very healthy business to call on to do $30, $40 million of revenue. But they have no reason to become a unicorn. They have no reason to go public. And those companies will essentially become vertical SaaS companies. And we will have gazillions of vertical SaaS companies. And when I say mom and pop, they will operate in Brazil, in the pharmaceutical center in Brazil, in the south of Brazil. And they have a fantastic business. And they won't be a global pharmaceutical software firm that does that any longer. all these markets will start to become vertical and vertical using standard products and become more, and I call them mom and pop, not to insult, but more, hey, mom and pop, high quality deliverables and so on and so forth. That's the third storm. And that third storm is brewing, right? It's right on the horizon. We can all see it.
So actually, it's kind of crazy to think about this stuff. I've just been listening to this whole conversation now.
You're welcome.
And the thing I keep going back to now is that the barrier to entry is incredibly low as well because of this new technology we have. So to your point, anyone can come in and disrupt. And I heard, of all people, Ben Affleck talk about what does AI mean to the movie industry. And he was excited because now anyone who has an idea to create a movie, they can so much more easily go and create, right? And I just wonder, where is this going to take us? What's going to happen next? And what is the human involvement in whole this endeavor going to be? Like you pointed out, at some point, the human hops onto the call, right?
Okay, listen to this, because Mikkel, you point a perfect example. Netflix, essentially, I don't know about you, but I used to go to the cinema. I'm sorry, I'm a cinema freak, right? And I hate that it's no longer there, but I used to go to the cinema at least once a week and during the hot seasons 2 times a week, right? I can't find a movie in the cinema any longer because everything is on Netflix nowadays, right? And so I kind of am disappointed about that, of course. And so we can say Netflix is killing the Hollywood industry. And believe me, although they may be in geographical, from the rest of the perspective of the world, they may be close, it's 2 worlds apart, right? LA and San Francisco, they don't like each other. And well, media land doesn't like technology, right? But look at what happened. What Netflix did is it launched, I am now watching Korean, pop, series. I'm watching Norwegian, right? I'm watching Norwegian crime. I'm watching Spanish robbery series, right? I'm watching Dutch crack movies, right? Like whatever, Freddy is, right? And so suddenly Netflix enables a movie and entertainment industry with an outlet that says, hey, I got an outlet to the world, you create. And suddenly we have all kinds of regions demonstrating with all kind of local regional artists and actors finding a job. Yes, what did this cost? We are no longer funneling all our money to Hollywood. We are now funneling it to Amsterdam and to London and to Berlin and to Munich and Paris, where the local people, what we say, do not fear innovation. It doesn't threaten a job. It has historically proven that innovation creates jobs, but not at the same place where it disrupts it. Right? It creates it elsewhere. And so, like I said about the 70 people who are losing their job, because folks, wherever AI creates a new job, that's where they will pop up, right? And they will be fine. We don't have to worry about that, right? We can't design a business around let innovation stop us because we're worried about the 70%. But Netflix is a perfect example in this. Mikkel, thank you for bringing it up.
I also wonder, and this is super difficult also for us to even start guessing because humans are really terrible at estimating time. And we can sit and be really optimistic and say 2025, but how long will this kind of next wave take to really materialize, do you think?
Okay, that we have an answer for today. So many of you knows Moore's Law, which by the way is not a law, but as a technologist, it's whatever it is, right? It's a bridge to think about it. It's not governed by scientific principles. But Moore's Law is, every 18 months, we are able to do 2x the amount of, the price of the system goes about half, or we can double about the number of transistors in the old days on a square space, right? So we now have an AI law. And again, it's not a law, but it is about AI quadruples in performance every year about 4 times. So every year the performance of AI goes up about 4x. If you do that for 10 years, right, look, I'm not talking about the AGI, detailed cancer research AI performance. In our world of 2 human beings communicating with each other, for the next decade, we're going to improve 4x year over year, right? And for our intents and purposes, we're already in the world of AGI. And what I mean with that is we're already world in the ChatGPT and the like, the engines that we're currently running on with agents will give us AGI-like performance for what we need, right? We don't have to wait for it. It's already happened in our world. Mm-hmm. But it goes up 4x every time. Now, if you do 4x to the power of 10, right? Any idea on what you think that will come out?
I don't know, it's like 400 or something like that.
million times better. That means in a decade from now, our AI systems will be 1,000,000 times better than today. 1,000,000 times better. Okay?
Let's visualize that, you know.
You can't visualize that, right?
No.
But like, take a pizza, cut it in try to imagine what 1,000,000 pieces will look like, and then go like, that millionth piece is what you have right now. And that pizza is like, we can't comprehend it. Human beings cannot comprehend large volume of that, right? And exponential behavior. We are just not good at that.
Yes. So, and maybe to, close it out a little bit. Last time you were here, we were talking about I want to call it now the SaaS collapse. You didn't say it like this, but we would talk basically about that, right? And one of the very memorable lines there was like, hey folks, you're one of the 1%, knowing about this, you can do something about this now. Here, listen, this is what you need to do about, right? And see there, some of the SaaS collapse was like, some of that was ongoing, but it really accelerated. And kind of we all were like, hey, obviously Jacco was right. Now we're seeing this AI change happening. What is it that the top 1% that's listening to this, what is it that they should be taking away from, like, hey, I need to do those
notes.
AI
summary.
What are the 3 things, or what should people be doing right now that they've acquired this knowledge?
Work with AI, find a solution for AI for your product, or talk to your team and if you're a CEO, and tell your team that everybody needs to, for the next 30 days, experiment with the AI that is dedicated to their particular segment, right? Everybody has a form of an AI. I would ask them to ask of yourself the following question. When you look back 2 years from now, right? 2 years from now, AI, ChatGPT came out right about now, 2 years from now, right? Compared to how much you did Google search then. If you compare that to today, how much Google searching you do, in your case, what do you say? How much percentage are you still on Google versus where you were 2 years ago?
I don't know, 30, 40%, maybe, something like that. Okay. On my mobile, I'm like more on Google, I realized, for some reason. I don't know.
Okay. That's primarily because you touch your hand and you think it on your phone, right? The moment in time you install your ChatGPT app on the phone, then that even is game over, right? Like so, but it's because you haven't installed the app, which is because we think of it as a web app more than. But you'll get there, okay? But when we're going to find, and I'll take a careful number. We're taking into account that we are doing 30% less on Google searches than we used to do 2 years ago. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, I saw from a big search guy called Fishkin that it now accounts for roughly 6% of all searches, where YouTube is like 7%. So it's pretty big now in the whole pie chart.
And what we're seeing is that took 2 years. If I told you that Google would be threatened, like Google we know now that Google held its AI developments back to milk the SEO system for as long as they could, right? They just went into cash cow mode and go like, we're holding it back. And they're going to have to pay for that price because ChatGPT rushed in and took it away from them, right? Like had Google done this the way they should have, then we would have not have an issue. But they got caught, they got caught, right? And so now we're the world's largest internet company per today, right? Just got caught out in the cold, and that cost them 20 to 30% of my searches in 2 years. I want you to extrapolate that for another 2 years and see which company is going to do that again and again and again. And the thing is, I'll give you an idea. When we put humankind on the moon, it cost Western civilization as a whole about $37 billion. You can ChatGPT that if you want, right? If you ChatGPT that what that economic value is today, it would be $150 billion, which equates to the investment we currently have done in AI over the past years. Cancer, over the past 25 years, $200 billion is approximately invested in cancer research, according to ChatGPT, right? The only 2 industries that have historically gone faster and bigger up to this point, nuclear energy, and, although it's unrecorded, the US weapons industry probably want to say, hold my beer, I got something to say about this, right? Those are the 2. And we could argue that AI is a new weapons developer, and then we can all... Okay, so this thing is applying what the engine that we're applying to sales that is affecting this web talk ultimately is powered by $150 billion investment, which is going to double over the next 3 years. It's started, it's unstoppable. Folks, it is accelerating, right? Like, and it's not like, oh, Outreach came out with a new algorithm and is competing with SalesLoft against a new algorithm, and these two people are duking it out and we're all benefiting from their duking it out, right? No, we got like two of the largest behemoths in the world throwing government-like money at it, right? Powered by governments. I go like, people, can we please surf that wave? Can we please say, thank you very much, let's surf that wave in, right? And most executives sit on their hands because, I'm sorry to say, they're too old in their mind. Whether their physical age has nothing to do with it, but in their mind, too old. They can no longer adjust to all these changes. They're too old for it. They go like, I can't deal with all these changes. And as a result...
I mean, we had this... Mikkel and I had this feeling actually
we're
like
the old
6 or 12 months ago where, and you know, maybe we're still there. I'm not quite sure. But we had this feeling like, geez, all of these guys are talking about AI and we tried ChatGPT.
I was like, it
but
feels
we're
like
not really
Bitcoin.
using it.
Can't trust it.
Yeah, exactly. It's just the next, Web3 kind of thing. That has certainly changed, right? Yeah. So, I mean, I used to be an AI skeptic, actually, up until like, I think 3 months ago, I feel like. And now I've flipped. I've like completely flipped, in this regard and really excited. Like, I can't match your excitedness level, Jacco. I don't think anyone can, by the way. But, without me being able to express it, I'm really excited about what this thing is going to bring. But also, as a dad, I'm also like, shit, what are my kids actually going to do? And you know what? It's fine that I don't know. My mom also didn't know this about me. So it's fine that kind of exists. But you got to ask sometimes your questions, like, hey, what's going to happen in 10, 20 years from now? And your example of, hey, if something, 4 to the power of 10 is like 1 million or whatever, it's like, yeah, forget about it. We're not going to figure this out right now. We kind of need to live through it to see it. But those things do kind of captivate your mind sometimes.
Okay, there is a fantastic role down here, and there's a fantastic future. I'll align this with my wife the other day in the Tahoe Mountains, stepping on a wasp nest and being stung multiple times, to which she had an allergic reaction. Her breathing started to hurt her. She didn't rush to the emergency room. So the doctors told her, like, whenever that happens, anything that you get stung and that starts contriving your breathing, emergency room, period. So for those listeners. Now, she got stung, but she didn't go to the emergency room. Her body recovered and so on. In the days following up, she schedules an appointment with a doctor to go over it. And she starts researching the topic of wasps, like what the venom is and so on and so forth. She shows up at the doctor. I went with her, the general practitioner. And the general practitioner, long story short, fantastic practitioner, not a problem on the practitioner side, but doesn't know that much about venom and how to treat it. Knows the general stuff like, hey, here's an EpiPen, next time go to the emergency room. But other than that, thank you very much for coming, and don't be so stupid again that when you get stung, that you just wait it out, right? We go back, and it was not we're not happy with the outcome, right? And think there to yourself what is happening. The general practitioner, let's say, has half a day of people visiting her, in this case her. And so every person that visits has done ChatGPT-like analysis a year from now, done research, knows what their disease is, and this poor woman, doctor, has to deal with 25 different cases coming at her of well-researched people, right? She can never, as a general doctor, practitioner, she can never answer to that.
Yeah.
That's the world of the sales profession right now, right? Now, revert this around. Will my wife, Maureen, if there is a specialist out there in the world who specializes in venom and knows the difference and stuff, Maureen will never be able to do that, right? Like, what is that curve again, that you know too much, but you never know anything, right? There's a curve, a forgetting curve or something like that. Mm-hmm. But imagine Maureen does that, right? And she goes to a specialist, she won't be able to be the specialist, right? My point is this. If you're passionate about what you are passionate about, and you're an expert in that, and folks, the two of you are among the best podcasters of the way you ask questions, let me talk and stuff like that. I thank you very much for that, right? But you are fantastic, did your research, all that. If you're an expert at that, then you don't have nothing to fear. Right? Like that's the point that I'm trying to tell you. Like be an expert and do what you do it passionately. And those people who listen to this call an hour into it, if you're still listening, you're passionate about this topic. And you have nothing to fear. You will go with the wave. You will learn about your new topic. You will learn about ChatGPT, what the next thing, the one minds, and so on and so on. You will employ it. You will have nothing to fear. But what we don't need in the future world is generalists who pay a price, who ask a salary of a specialist, but are unable to deliver against it. We don't no longer need that.
Yeah. Jacco, thank you so much for spending the time with us. It was a pleasure always.
And there's a bunch to read up on here. There is a research paper on this. We'll link it in the show notes. I'm sure there's also a Winning by Design video on YouTube. If you haven't seen those yet, check them out. I don't know, Jacco, is there still music being played during those videos?
I can no longer do that because I get constantly struck at like the YouTube stops.
Oh yeah, copywriting, right?
Well, copywriting is fine. It just means that they place advertisements in your content and they send it to the rightful owner of the song. And so I don't have an issue with that. The reason why you can no longer do video is because they stop distributing it, because they go like, hey, we can't promote that video, right? You got to float on your own abilities, and then we have 20,000 followers, but I do like an occasional somebody I don't know watch my videos, right?
Yeah. The good old times of Jacco videos no longer available.
No, and realize in 2025, he'll just write a transcript or prompt, and then he has like an AI version of himself just being recorded. He can sit on the chair on the lawn and just relax.
You were close. The 2025 version, I have an AI system generate my own music track, so I do not have licensing rights to contend with, right? It's just, like that, then I can go back to music. But, I had to be very cautious. The other thing that I also found is that we all need, you folks, we're all educating people, right? And the education that we need is not coming in the normal way. Schools are not educating people the right way. So in the end, Mikkel and Tony, you folks are the education of this market, right? That's the function that you nowadays provide. So I highly encourage you to continue to do what you're doing with the podcast and focus more on AI and where it will place.
We're thinking about exactly that.
Thanks so much for joining, Jacco.
Thanks so much.
It was a pleasure to have you.